Well, so this should be quite exciting. First of all, I want to thank those who are here, who are newer, for being here. And then also we're going to have participation online. Let me just say this. The purpose of this class series, what we're going to be doing for the next 12 weeks, is to dig into and really take up the discoveries of the epistemology of economics and the breakthroughs in economic science, or what LaRouche refers to as physical economics, or the science of physical economy, that has been made over several decades by Lyndon LaRouche. And I want to say that this is not to be a lecture or a class discussion. As a matter of fact, how we're organized here, we're probably going to change that up, because we're going to be doing a lot of hands-on reading, discussion, and discovery, and not just getting told what LaRouche is saying, but to actually all of us to work together to come to an understanding of what is really at the foundation of Lyndon LaRouche's 4 laws. And so what I want to say for those who are watching online, it might be a little bit of technical difficulties today in terms of including you, but I would like to have the opportunity for those who are watching on the YouTube to be able to submit questions. You may not be able to do that live right now, but you can email your questions to schillerinstitute.tx@gmail.com, and myself or some of the other presenters will get back to you. And once we figure out maybe how to take live questions, we'll do that soon. So what I want to do is to give a quick overview and insight in terms of the fight that's now underway and some of the activities that have taken place. And then we want to go straight into the discussion and the work around Lyndon LaRouche's economics studies, titled "So You Wish to Learn All About Economics." And so that's going to be the principal work and the basis of our next 12 weeks of discussions. First of all, I do want to say that today there was a very important meeting that took place in New York. I don't have the details on it yet. It will be available soon, with Helga Zepp-LaRouche and a supporter, Mr. Patrick Ho from Hong Kong, from China. So this is, and the basis of this discussion was to further the process of development around what the United States must participate in with the development of the participation in China's offer of win-win cooperation, the New Silk Road, and where the United States recovery program really lies, which is in international cooperation and joining and working with nations such as China. So I won't say much on that, except that it happened and people should know about it and look for that. It will be coming out material from on the website soon. Now, let me just go through where we're at right now and situate that for a few moments before we get into the discussion, which is that we're at a point right now where Lyndon LaRouche has laid out 4 laws to save the nation. His 4 laws start with Glass-Steagall banking reorganization, and they are principles. They are stated principles which take up the question of the fight that must govern the nation and the survival of real economic progress in the nation right now. And I think it's important that we take up Lyndon LaRouche's foundation and insight that goes back to the fight of what was deemed the American system of political economy versus that of the British imperial system of monetarism. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more as we work through Lynn's works, because the fight that's now underway for Glass-Steagall is not just a matter of policy or not just a matter of an up or down vote and are you for this or against it, but Glass-Steagall really has to be looked at as a final end to this British Empire and a final end to the Wall Street imperial control and domination over our country. And Mr. LaRouche very clearly stated years ago in putting this fight on the table for the restoring and return of Glass-Steagall that this is not just a piece of legislation. And Wall Street knows this. This is once and for all saying we will not allow for the criminal speculators and financial interests of money, a monetary system, dominate and dictate what should be considered, what should be the progress and development of the nation. And so this is why right now, what we are seeing after what just happened with the coming into this new presidency, into the Donald Trump winning the presidency, which two things were put on the table. First of all, Glass-Steagall was supported in both party platforms, in the Democratic and Republican Party platforms. And it was the fact that the President of the United States now, Donald Trump, during his campaign, made clear of his reference of his support for Glass-Steagall on the campaign trail. And this is not something that Wall Street is going to sit by idly and say, oh, yeah, sure, I guess we're outnumbered. We're going to let Glass-Steagall go through. Remember, when Barack Obama was in the White House, this was the last thing that he was supporting because he was in bed absolutely with the Wall Street financial interests. He went to Congress when Glass-Steagall was being introduced and sent some of his strong arms to make sure that nothing could happen in terms of moving this forward. Now, the situation is very clear that, as Mr. LaRouche has warned, the entire financial system since 2007, 2008 has continued to disintegrate on a downward spiral, the entire transatlantic financial system. And the world, with the election, with the repudiation of Obama, Hillary Clinton, the repudiation of the war drive, the understanding that Trump put the support of Glass-Steagall on the table, realizes that there's a new shift in the United States underway and that we have to hold this president's feet to the fire. We have to declare that Wall Street must be eliminated and that Glass-Steagall and the four principal laws of Lyndon LaRouche must be enacted now. And this is exactly what's happening. For those who have not seen it, there's a few things in terms of the escalation of this fight that just took place within this recent week. First of all, for the first time for the 9th anniversary, first time in 6 years, there was a press conference held, a bipartisan press conference by Representatives Marcy Kaptur, Walter Jones, Tim Ryan, and Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii, Marcy Kaptur from Ohio, Walter Jones, North Carolina, Tim Ryan from Ohio, and Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii. And they introduced on February 1st held a press conference to support and introduce the Return to Prudent Banking Act and urged President Donald Trump to live up to his campaign promises of reinstating Glass-Steagall protections in our banking system. The bill is a bipartisan bill and it has 26 co-sponsors and is now endorsed by the public citizens and AFL-CIO. On top of that, there's been a growing number of state legislators that have introduced Glass-Steagall bills, including bills that have been Glass-Steagall resolutions and bills in support of LaRouche's 4 laws, which they're calling an economic recovery program. The latest one that was introduced in support of Glass-Steagall for an economic recovery was a resolution in Mississippi, and the Mississippi legislature calls for Glass-Steagall and 4 points economic recovery. It cites the FDR impact in the state. So now I want to just give a couple of highlights of the messages and what was actually presented by the Congress members at the press conference who sponsored the Return to Prudent Banking Glass-Steagall Act. Quote, "The 2008 crash nearly took down our entire economy and led to the Great Recession, which wiped out average Americans' income. But now Democrats and Republicans have memorialized support for Glass-Steagall in their respective political platforms. Even President Trump has declared his support for a new Glass-Steagall law," said Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur. Quote, "That is why we are here, to build on the momentum and the movement to reinstate Glass-Steagall," end quote. Quote, "Wall Street banks should not be allowed to use taxpayer-insured consumer deposits to gamble in the markets and then get taxpayer bailouts for failed decisions," said Congressman Walter B. Jones. "It's time to put American taxpayers and depositors first. It's time to pass the Return to Prudent Banking Act and reinstate Glass-Steagall," end quote. Quote, "I am proud to sponsor the Return to Prudent Banking Act, which revives the separation between commercial banking and securities companies as written in the Glass-Steagall Act. These are smart financial reforms designed to protect our economy from other financial crises and hardworking American taxpayers from another Wall Street collapse. We know that the climate for deregulation led to the financial crisis. We can't let that happen again," end quote, said Congressman Tim Ryan. Quote, "From the Great Depression through the turn of the 21st century, Glass-Steagall helped keep our economy safe. Repealing it allowed too big to fail banks to gamble with the savings and livelihoods of the American people, with devastating, irrevocable consequences. Hawaii, along with communities across the country, paid the price in 2008 with the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Today, the banks that were too big to fail in 2008 are even bigger and more powerful now. We must reinstate Glass-Steagall and create a financial system that works for every American, not just Wall Street banks," said Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. So now they declared the fight that Lyndon LaRouche has been on the grounds waging for the past over 8 years now for the return to Glass-Steagall. And with the support coming from President Trump, bipartisan support in both houses, trust me, Wall Street is not happy about this. As a matter of fact, it was the case that just as this press conference and the bill for Glass-Steagall was being reintroduced into the House of Representatives, along with massive support coming from around the country, including the fact that we had the LaRouche organization had a delegation in the Congress that day of over 35 people from the East Coast, Baltimore, New York, and other places that were in Congress that day. It was also the case that one of our representatives, economics director Paul Gallagher, joined a a delegation of Ohio, our revolution representatives, Ohio activists who traveled to Washington, D.C. in support of the Crude and Banking Act. And I think it's important that people know that this delegation of the Ohio Our Revolution representatives in support of Glass-Steagall had circulated an open letter to President Trump, which we have also on our website, along with a call for the Glass-Steagall, support for Glass-Steagall, and a petition that we are circulating in support of this, that asked him to keep his pledge to support Glass-Steagall. They presented on the day of the press conference, Representative Captor with 637 signed letters addressed to the president, holding him to his campaign promises of supporting the return to a Glass-Steagall Act. The Ohio delegation included many former delegates to the Democratic Convention and candidates for public office, including Congress. One second. The Toledo Our Revolution leader addressed the press. His name is Dennis Slotnick, addressed the press audience of 30 people at the Captor Press event and said, quote, "We are here from Ohio not only because we strongly support this legislation, but also because we are the voice of the 637 people who signed these letters and the tens of thousands of others who would sign if they saw the letter," end quote. Signatures were gathered by members of the Progressive Caucus of Ohio Revolution. So there is definitely a line in the sand that has been drawn, and Wall Street knows this, and Wall Street knows that this fight is being waged by Lyndon LaRouche, and LaRouche's understanding that this is not just about a piece of legislation. This is now a line in the sand of, will we continue to go down in the direction of being controlled by the enemy interest of Wall Street and the British Empire, whose policy has been to completely reject this idea of what the United States and our founding fathers intended for this nation to represent. The idea of what is a nation, a true republic, what is the principles and conceptions of economic value, productivity of a society, which is very key and well understood in the works of the first Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton. And Hamilton's understanding of that fight that was led by those who left the imperial colonial British policies and came to the United States to form a new nation, a new world, because they wanted to have better conditions for life for the people of this nation than were under the subjectivity of a British Empire. And so the fact that our policies of economics today have been dominated by evil people like Adam Smith and his so-called Wealth of Nations, and Jeremy Bentham and others, that completely defy what the principles of economics were really centered around, has to be crushed, because it's not just about Glass-Steagall. It's about Glass-Steagall, as I said before, as just a piece of legislation to be voted up or down. This is now the question at hand of, will the American people return to a clear understanding of the fight for the principles of our Constitution, of the Republic of our nation. And that's why we're going to be studying Lyndon LaRouche's economics, so you can really understand that fight and what is at the core of his 4 laws and the principles of his 4 laws. So I think I want to leave that portion, just make sure here. really quickly. Yes. Let me just say this again for those in the room who haven't already done so, for those who are listening, that we are in a fight to the end to win this fight against Wall Street and against what they have represented in the destruction of our nation. And I must say that fight doesn't just stop at some they them people who are not named and cannot be understood. When you say Wall Street, they have names and you can go after them, particularly the fact that you have people that after this press conference took place with the 4 representatives from Congress, bipartisan support, and 26 co-sponsors on this newly introduced bill. First thing that happened is that you had people like Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase and other representatives of Wall Street, Goldman Sachs operations said, oh, we better get over to President Trump quick. We got to put a stop to this. And we know how he works. We could say, particularly from experience here, Jamie Dimon here in Texas, when we had support for Glass-Steagall in the Texas legislature, Jamie Dimon came into Texas and directly met with the former governor of Texas, Rick Perry, and said, I hope you're planning on doing something about this to stop this, because if you don't, then you can expect that money will be taken out of your state. So these guys don't play fair at all. They're killers, criminals, crooks, and they will do everything to stop this Glass-Steagall mobilization. And they don't play party politics either, because the British agent who is running around supporting and working on behalf of the British Empire and on behalf of Wall Street, the notorious George Soros, and I know every time anybody says that word, George Soros, people cringe in disgust, because this guy his pedigree is not human. And the fact that he is running around creating and orchestrating a intended campaign to destroy any potential toward progress, to destroy this Trump administration, and to make sure that it does not succeed at all by infiltrating in every way, including creating these orchestrated media-run opposition and attacks that are going on right now to take the focus off of the real fight around crushing Wall Street and the economic solutions that have to be put on the table. Because I don't care if you are woman, male, female, straight, black, white, Mexican, whatever, that if you're not fighting for Glass-Steagall and for an economic solution to put food on the table, to make sure you have a job, then you're out in the street marching for the wrong thing, because you're not going to survive. And I think that has to be made clear, that George Soros manipulates both sides of the aisle. He funds Republicans, he funds Democrats, he funds those who are in bed with Wall Street and who are with his agenda to destroy this nation. So if you think you're getting something out of that, then you're highly mistaken. So I think that what we need right now is for everybody to take a step back and make a clear commitment now that you're going to join with Linda LaRouche, who has stood on principle from the very beginning, not on partisan issues, not on sides, but on principle of the question of the fight to defend mankind in the interest of human progress. And the first thing we need people to do is to put a stop to George Soros, the British Empire, and anybody George Soros is supporting, like Stephen Mnuchin, this has-been who is now being put up as the Treasury Secretary for our nation, for the Treasury Secretary of our nation under President Donald Trump, who has outright opposed the Glass-Steagall Act. And if President Trump is saying he's going to repeal or do away with Dodd-Frank, the only option he has of anything that can be to stand up to Dodd-Frank in a real fight is Glass-Steagall. And he doesn't have any other option. And it was made clear in a message by his press secretary, Sean Spicer, when asked the question, does President Trump still intend to support Glass-Steagall? He said yes. The president plans to follow through on his promise. So we have to hold him to his word on that. If we get thousands more signatures on the petition for Glass-Steagall to go into our congressional offices to educate them on LaRouche's 4 laws, that Glass-Steagall is just the first step. We're going to have to wipe out this entire criminal banking system to put forth a credit program so that we can invest in real productivity, in jobs, in infrastructure, and that we can actually advance the nation and society forward. And you cannot capitulate to Wall Street, to George Soros or anybody else because they try to change the subject of the discussion. Don't allow the subject to be changed. The fight right now is crushing Wall Street and this British Empire. It's Glass-Steagall now. It's Glass-Steagall or die, and anything else is irrelevant. So I'm going to leave my remarks on that subject just in terms of the opening updates of what's going on there. And then want to give me a second here. Okay. I'm going to start the discussion off about just on some of the key principles in Lynn's scientific works. And I would encourage questions, discussion, people to jump in while this is loading here. So I want to read a quote from Lyndon LaRouche that addresses this very question and what has characterizes his works as a economist, or what might be known as a physical economist. And there's a difference between the economist in the economics secondary education system of today versus the economics that were understood by going back to the founding fathers and those before. But I will go through that in a minute. So the textbook that LaRouche put out in 1984 is titled "So You Wish to Learn All About Economics." And this textbook was also accompanied by, or it was put along with a production that when Lyndon LaRouche was running for president at that time that he did himself, and we'll play a clip of that a little bit later, called The Power of Labor. It's a 5-part series that accompanies this book, which it's very powerful because, and people who are listening from home and who want to actually go and look at it yourself, the entire thing, and we'll probably be playing some segments of it as we go on with these classes. You can find it on the LaRouchePack.com website, at the top, there's a tab that says About LaRouche. And if you click on it, and at the bottom, it'll have a pull down bar. At the end of the pull down bar, it says On LaRouche's Discovery. And you will see the video link to the Power of Labor video. Now, so this question is very important because fruitful refers to what does it mean to be productive? How do you measure productivity in society? How do you measure economic value? How do you measure wealth? And this is what we are going to take up and discuss in LaRouche's Principles of Physical Economy. And it's really what Lynn starts with, Lynn LaRouche, at the foundation of the core principles of a Judeo-Christian principle that at the foundation of it is the idea of Genesis 1:28, the conception of to be fruitful, to multiply and subdue and replenish the earth. And the question is, what does it actually take to replenish the earth? What are the conceptions and understanding of economic progress, which is necessary to understand that mankind is not limited to a limited resources on the planet, that once the resources, unlike what is believed by people like Thomas Malthus and others, run out, then you have no other availability. And so you can only live as long as you have enough resources, and can only survive on a certain land area as long as you have enough resources to be on that land area. But what is understood by LaRouche in his economics is defined here in a statement that he later writes in another paper that he does, which I think very clearly characterizes who he is as a physical economist, and the understanding of his profession. When this is from a writing that he does a few years later, which is titled In Defense of Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton, was published in 1987. So he says here, and I don't have a slide for this one, so it's short. I'm just going to read it. I do have, I'll tell you when to put it up in a second, right? 1 second. He says, in my profession, I am primarily an economist, and by scientific standards, a very successful one. All my works in this field lies within the policy framework of the American system, defined by such leading economists as Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, Matthew and Henry Carey, the two Careys, and Friedrich List. Without that context, within that context, I have added an important discovery. My discovery, known around the world today as the LaRouche-Riemann method, does not overturn anything proposed by Alexander Hamilton's famous 1791 report on the subject of manufacturers, but only strengthens Hamilton's policies rather significantly. Within Hamilton's report on the subject of manufacturers, the following passage appears prominently. Can you put that up? And this is what Hamilton says: to cherish and stimulate the activity of the human mind by multiplying the objects of enterprise is not among the least considerable of the expedients by which the wealth of a nation may be promoted. Now, LaRouche responds to this by stating that the connection between inventions of mind and the increase in the physical productive powers of labor, which we'll get into, is the kernel of the American system. And so this is going to be key to understanding the further development of LaRouche's economics and the kernel of the American system being the subject of the human mind being the primary fostering of creative and productive progress. It's not money, not bartering, but it is actually the increases in new discoveries and the productive powers of the human mind to make new discoveries and breakthroughs and technological advancements is what is at the core of what it means to be fruitful, at the core of economic value. Now, the role of the human mind in economics was not something that was accepted at all by the British oligarchs and the British economists whose policies and whose economics has actually dominated our country for many decades now. The policies of Adam Smith, of Jeremy Bentham, Lord Shelburne, some of the top so-called economists of the British Empire did not consider the advancements in the productive creative powers of the human mind as the measurement of wealth. They had a different conception of what measures wealth, which was based on a real bestial idea of man. It was the idea of man as not created in the image of the Creator, mankind as not having a commitment to the principles of Genesis 1, to be fruitful and productive in a way that was going to transform the environment and the society in which they live. But what was a writing by Adam Smith, most people know about his writing on the wealth of a nation, that actually was a direct refutation to, it was written in 1776. It was a direct refutation to the establishment of our republic. And it was also very much organized the idea of an economy based on just a system of monetary value. If you have money, if you want something, you can exchange with somebody else, you know, for the purchasing and trading of goods. But even more disgustingly, his conception of man and as in this bestial way was demonstrated in a work that he wrote called the Theory of Moral Sentiments. And I have a link for that. Okay, here we go. So I'll let somebody to just kind of get the discussion going a bit here. Why don't we take can you see this? A volunteer to read it. This is Adam Smith here.
The administration of the great system of the universe, the care of universal happiness of all rational and sensible beings, is the business of God and not of man. To man is allotted a much humbler department, but one more suitable to the weakness of his powers.
Keep going. There's more.
There's more? Yeah.
Well, that's all I got up here.
What's it taken from, though? Keisha, say that
The
again.
next slide.
Well, there's no other side.
Oh.
Yeah, that's it.
Keisha, for the viewers, can you say what it's taken from?
This is from the Theory of Moral Sentiments by Adam Smith. Adam Smith. This is Adam Smith. Hold on one second here. There's no more up there? Well, so that doesn't get to the part I wanted to communicate, because what he goes on to say is that the theory, it's on the theory on moral sentiments. He basically says, God is so wonderful that he created mankind, and God is perfect, but mankind is bestial, and the purpose of mankind to foster the growth of value in society is, or what fosters value in society is the man's instinct to always seek pleasure and avoid pain. And the actual quote is really telling. If I find that a little bit later, then let's see if I had this here with me. No, I have it on this. So, yeah, sorry about that. Didn't come out right. So technical difficulties. But this is what Adam Smith says, is that the way people actually measure value in society is by what they enjoy. If they enjoy something, they're going to buy it. They're going to buy it. They're going to do what it takes to get it. He talks about the instinct of the sensual pleasures, the pleasures of the two sexes, the pleasures of people that people take pleasure, and they see value in that which makes them feel good, versus that which actually increases their ability to be more productive in society, increases their ability to be more creative. They're not thinking about how to be more creative, and they're thinking about how to make more money. And if you make more money, then you can do more things that you can be happy about, such as things that make you feel good, pleasurable things. So
buying Super Bowl tickets.
Yeah, exactly. Like
There's value.
buying
Right?
Super Bowl tickets, or wanting to sit in the long traffic of Houston and paid $4,000 for a Super Bowl ticket, for a minimum Super Bowl ticket. I don't know what they pay for the big tickets. So, this again, you really have to look at the degeneracy of what the British Empire represents. As this was exactly what our founding fathers were opposing. This idea of the economic value of society was found in this bestial conception of mankind. And so now, what I want to do is I'm going to go through a couple of things also that take up in the first, that LaRouche takes up in the first chapter further of the science first chapter.
So people can read their books.
Yeah.
And also so we don't get eye aches.
Like me. I'm squinting up here. One second. Okay. So we're going to do some homework assignments, because I think, we'll read a lot of the material in the book together. Some of it we'll kind of just take up in broad sweep and come back to if there's questions on.
Should turn this off, teacher?
136, by the way, has the quote that you were wanting to quote.
Oh, okay.
Page 136.
1/3, thank you.
A quote from them.
Oh yeah, he showed.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Here we are, and let me read this. That's good. Thank you.
Page 136 for
page-
everybody who wants to open
Page
it up.
136. Yes. This is the quote that I was trying to have on the board here, from Adam Smith, and his introduction to the principles on the theories on the principles on moral legislation. This is Smith's theory on the moral sentiments. So I'm not going to read the whole quote here. Well, hold on one second.
Read the whole quote.
Read the whole quote, okay. All right. Okay, so it says, the administration of the great system of the universe, the care of the universal happiness of all rational and sensible beings, is the business of God and not of man. To man is allotted a much humbler department, but one much more suitable for the weakness of his powers and the narrowness of his comprehension, the care of his own happiness, of that of his family, his friends, his country. But though we are endowed with a very strong desire of these ends, it has been entrusted to the slow and uncertain determinations of our reason to find out the proper means of bringing them about. Nature has directed us to the greater part of these by original and immediate instincts, hunger, thirst, and the passion which unites the two sexes, the love of pleasure and the dread of pain, prompt us to apply those means for their own sake and without any consideration of their tendency to those beneficent ends which the great director of nature intended to produce by them. Emphasis that. So there you go. Now, and gives you a picture of these criminals, and we can do a whole class on them. Jeremy Bentham having his stuffed, and yeah, he was, he thought he was, yeah, evil, nasty guy. Yeah. So now let's take up some of the reading of Lynn's works.
Every so often, can you show the cover of the book so the viewers can see?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it really
Here you
helps.
go. So you wish to learn all about economics. And we're gonna have to work on this because this was not how I planned to do this, especially not with me standing up here. So we to read this. So we'll have to reorganize ourselves. But yeah, give me 1 second here. Okay, let's start just to kind of get it introduction into it by reading the first 2 pages of the first chapter here, and I'll stop and add. And what we'll do is we'll kind of go around the room and take turns reading it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Kind of get the discussion going, and then I'll help fill in some parts or get the discussion going. So
What page do you want to start reading?
page 1.
I volunteer.
Okay. Go ahead, Betty, and then next person just jump in.
The significant feature
That's the-
Are we still online?
We are online.
Well, then, are they gonna be able to hear?
No, they won't. Should we be online?
Yeah, well,
You
Turn the camera
I'll
around.
just turn the
You
camera
turn it-
around and get Betty.
turn the
closer
cam-
to Betty and come
Yeah.
over here.
yeah, because there's people online who want to participate. So.
You want me to move up?
Yeah,
Well, you can do that a little bit.
they just speak louder. They can hear you. This room is not that big.
Okay. Chapter 1, Leibniz's approach to economic science. The significant feature of the heat-powered machine is the functional relationship between increase of the power supplied to such machines and the increase of the operative's power to accomplish work. From the examination of this functional relationship, Gottfried Leibniz, who lived from 1646 to 1716, defined the notions of power, work, and technology within physical science. The study of this functional relationship extended from the specific case of the heat-powered machine to all other features of the productive process constitutes the subject matter of physical economy. Physical economy is an integral feature of physical science as a whole. The study of political economy in a manner everywhere governed by principles of physical economy is economic science. You want me to continue?
Mhm.
The practical setting for Leibniz's development of economic science was his intention that mining, manufacturing, and water transportation should be revolutionized by general use of coal-powered steam engines. Leibniz's collaborator, Denis Papin, 1647 to 1714, was the first to develop a successful steam engine, an engine which successfully powered a riverboat. Leibniz explained that the development of manufacturing based on coal-fired steam engines required a qualitative improvement in the mining of coal and ores. This improvement required the application of the steam engine to such mining applications as pumping water as a precondition for the application of coal-fired potentialities to manufacturing. This was the kernel of the economic program which Leibniz supplied to Russia's Peter I, which is why Russia grew to surpass Britain in scale of development of mining and manufacturing during the course of the 18th century. The revolution in mining, prompted by Leibniz's influence, radiated from cameralist centers in Germany to North and South America and into the development of Japan.
Okay. So people see on page 2, there's a picture of Gottfried Leibniz there. On page 3, there's a picture I'll just keep it on the video. There's a picture of Denis Papin. And so Leibniz, I want to show, first of all, Leibniz's work was the development of works that had come before, going back to the role of Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, Leonardo da Vinci, 1452 to 1519. And it was Da Vinci who actually was the person who was the developer of the modern steam-powered machine and started to, and he actually, and I think the purpose of where this is going back to, and to look back at this development has to start, first of all, from a scientific and economic principle, because LaRouche is not just writing about steam engines and writing about how the ins and outs of coal powered plants and ore work. But the question of going back to that there is a principle of conception in the way that the universe and society is organized that really starts with the foundation of the development of new machinery and new technologies, which is not just based on something that doesn't have a direction to it, but it has a direct implication of the ordering principle of the universe. And it really goes back to what was defined first and foremost by Nicholas of Cusa in the late 13th, 14th century, of Cusa's discovery and rediscovery of the principle of the principle of least action, which his discovery of the principle of least action was the key measurement of technology, of the introduction of new increases in machinery and technology. And so, just to give an example, here we go. Okay, so this is kind of to play with the mind here, what people don't really think about in terms of how machinery even works, how a machine tool principle works, why it's the most effective organizing for an increase in the ability to produce more work. And this is what Leibniz develops later, which is he goes through in his works on calculus, his works on his discoveries on the principle of least action. Question is, what is a least action pathway to actually producing something more productively? And this, first of all, was you can apply the principles of the maximum minimum principle, the ideas and discoveries of Nicholas Cusa in the ordering of the universe by looking at Cusa's discovery of circular action, the rediscovery of circular action. So this is, again, one of LaRouche's fundamental discoveries and how he understood, how Cusa, Leibniz, and others understood that if you wanted to increase the productivity of society, you had to increase the ability for society to produce machinery that was going to help them to become more efficient, more effective, and to actually be able to work better, more to be able to produce more through their work. And if they produce more through their work because they have the aid of this machinery, which is, you think about, for instance, how we're taught in school in terms of how the way that we think about geometry. You know, people don't know how machines work because they don't understand the real principles of geometry. You know, they think that the Euclidean conception of geometry, that the universe is made up of points and lines, is how geometry is organized. And, you know, this might seem childish or secondary education, but, you know, most of people who might be over 60 in this room was probably taught that you have y-axis and x-axis, and you have lines and points, and those lines and points occur on a Euclidean plane or flat surface, and that you can organize principles of geometry based on this. But is that really true? is that actually how society is organized? And so, you take a simple principle and concept, and you look at a discovery based on geometry of action oriented, not just, you have a flat piece of paper. And this is, believe me, there are still people out there right now who are preaching the flat earth society and everything else, who really are still putting out this whole narrative line that, the universe is flat. But that was already disproven a long time ago. And so we take something like a circle, which, first of all, I think it's important. This circle just not, you don't just find circles lying around like this. So what is the action that is that's actually necessary to create this circle? So many of you probably in school, and you had to one of these instruments called a compass, and you were told to put your compass at the center point, create a center point, and create a circle, which I can't do like this, but this is, so when you put your compass at a point and you take the take the compass and create an action with your compass, what is this action that you're creating? Is your hand going up and down, back and forth?
Clockwise.
Yeah.
Circular.
It's circular action. So in order to do that, so now you can take another, so you have now taken the compass and actually rotated it around the 360 degree rotation and created circular action. You can rotate that again on itself, taking the same circular action, and now you've rotated 180 degrees on itself. And so you have a question of where a line comes from. Well, again, you have the principle of circular action. Now you've taken that and rotated and created the basis of what is what we would call the diameter of the circle. But that diameter of the circle is really a circular action that is organized to form the basis of a line. If you rotate that circle on itself again through circular action, then you have the intersection of two lines, which at the intersection of those two lines is where you find the action that creates what is known in geometry as a point. And so that is just on plane surface, on circular action through two-dimensional space, as we would say, that you actually are creating. So you have circular action to create the reference points for lines and for a line and for a point. And then if you take the next leap and you look at what is the next dimension of circular action, through spherical action, then you are going into a completely different metric system and measurement of this circular action. because you're rotating circular action on itself through three-dimensional space. And that's something that we should look at. And this is really goes to the basis of why, if you look at the two pictures I have there from Da Vinci. Yeah, so we're talking about circular action being a self-evident form of existence in visible space, and the circular action and what we just demonstrated here is found in the organizing principles of the advancements of machine tool principles, which were further understood by this schematic done by Leonardo da Vinci, which really go back even further than Cusa's discovery, because Nicholas of Cusa, before we show this, let's go to the solids real quick. Okay, and then I'll come back from here. Was making a discovery of how this action applies to the ordering principle of the universe based on the construction of circular and spherical action is what is absolutely the defining of the boundary conditions of the organizing of a development of machinery, of the principles of how the universe is organized, that through this circular action, through the folding and action of rotation, there are, and this is something that some of us have been studying here, we're just doing some of the works that were further developed later by Johannes Kepler. There are only 5 regular solids, and this is something that I can say, but you also have to do the geometric investigation to figure it out yourself, why it is that there are through the embedded in a sphere, through circular action, the creating through circle and spherical action, you can only come to the formation in every principle of geometry. You can only come up with 5 solids, these known as the regular solids, platonic solids, that can be created. Now, go back to the Da Vinci diagrams. So this first diagram is, well, first of all, go to the other one on the man diagram. And this is the question you can ask is, well, where is the circular action in the universe? If we look at this room, it doesn't look like a big circle to us. But what is it? But where is it actually that this action is organized, that is demonstrated everywhere within the universe? Well, first of all, it's demonstrated through how various life forms are organized. It's organized through the principles within mankind. So I'll show you, for example, if I take my hand and move it in a rotating action, take my arm, the way that the human body is organized is that it's always in a rotating or circular motion. I can't really create a straight line with my body. You find this in other features too. This is just an example of what a schematic that Da Vinci laid out, which we will get into more, but just to kind of put it out there, just in terms of that there is a principle governing the process of what is going to characterize the ability to produce machinery that's going to mimic and increase what is already in effect the way that the human body works. So let's look at the other one.
Can you look at something smaller than that, like the atom, and think about the nucleus and the way electrons travel? Because that's what keeps popping into my mind. That, because when you're demonstrating this, I'm thinking about an atom and a nucleus and the gravitation centering around it, creating that circular movement.
Robert who?
Robert
Who?
Boom.
Robert Boone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which goes to the question of the platonic solids and the nesting of those solids we can get into. So this diagram is not really what it demonstrates. It's kind of a lot, but
Paper was expensive back then.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, paper is very expensive. So, you have these wheels that are spinning, turning a turbine, turning and creating the ability.
Turning the wheel.
The water is turning the wheel. This is water down here. Yeah. And the whole, you have, what he's using is he's making these machines that are characteristic of this principle of what is characteristic of the action principle in society that was already discovered by Nicholas and Kluza and others of circular action, which increases the power and the productivity of the machines to actually do more work. And because they're actually organized around the principles which are embedded in the universe of circular rotation, circular action, which increases the work power of the human work power, as well as the ability of increasing the understanding of how you produce more effective machinery. This is the increase of the steam-powered engine. So this was one of the first steps to Papin's discovery of and Kristen Horgan's of the steam-powered engine, which was essential to the increases in the transportation systems of our society, which created the locomotive engine, which created the steam engines of the rail systems, the rail engines, but those things would not have been possible if it hadn't been for the breakthroughs and the works that came before that to actually organize, to understand the organizing principle of the universe based on this least action principle of society. What is what is the quickest and fastest path by which you can actually create a pathway to accomplishing and more efficient work. And this is an example of that. So another example that LaRouche uses is that as you're creating more, the least action pathway to implementing more productive work, you're doing this through the discovery of a design of moving from a simple design such as what is the force and what is the action that is required. For instance, if you have a simple machine, such as a knife, and I don't have an apple or something right now to demonstrate it on, but you can take a knife and you start to look at where is the greatest amount of force demonstrated on that knife. Something to think about. What to actually, would it be on the blade tip? Would it be on the handle?
Closer to the handle.
Why do you say closer to the handle?
Well, not on the tip. Because if you strike it and you only use the tip, it doesn't have as much force to cut as fast and hard.
What about the middle of the blade? Aren't you pushing down into the apple?
I couldn't hear the last thing you said.
Well, I mean, I cut an apple recently, and then, you're exerting pressure on the handle. There's in the middle of the blade, you're pushing down, and the middle of the blade is digging into the center of the apple. Is that? I'm not sure I understand.
What if you turn the knife over? So you're using the spine of the knife instead of its edge.
That would be horrible.
That would be horrible, wouldn't it? So the force you're putting down becomes efficient with the sharp edge. That is on the same force that you would push down on the spine wouldn't cut the apple.
Right.
If you have the same force by turning it over, now that force is concentrated on a far smaller surface. So it becomes more efficient. It's more pounds of pressure per square inch. So it's going to be more efficient. And that's what cuts it.
Yeah, those side to back side wouldn't work. So the force of the hand on the blade pressing down on the handle pressing down on the sharp side of the blade is where you find the greatest density of energy and the greatest force of energy is found at that sharp end of the blade. So this is an example of the question of where is the energy concentrated in a machine? Where is it the greatest force of energy in terms of where is it the most productive?
I think that's another point of the power of that instrument, because you're talking about leverage. That the leverage that you're applying on the handle, is different than if you were using a razor blade.
Mm-hmm.
And
Good
it was
example.
pushed on the back, of the single edge razor blade. The fact that you have a knife with leverage is
Mhm.
a whole different dimension of
So
the
the
power.
shape of the knife as well as the blade.
Well, not the
Right.
shape so much as the ability to use it as a lever.
Yeah. Right. But you can't use it as a lever as easily if you don't. It depends upon the style of the knife. Also to get the better leverage.
But the question in both those cases is the design of what you're using. That is the whole discussion of technology. How are you increasing that efficiency, from one application to another, and how does that efficiency continue to go up?
Right.
What is the inside of the human being that allows you to continue the increase of those efficiencies?
Yeah, that's a good example. Like the question of, if you had a fork and you're trying to push the fork down into the apple to cut the apple versus having a sharp blade, or like she said, if you have or have a razor blade, just a not the small straight edge razor blade, the application of that fork or that razor blade is going to have less energy application. And I'm using that loosely. It's going to be less efficient than actually having the knife with a concentrated energy that once the hand presses down on the blade on the handle, into the blade, into the object, into the apple, that you're going to be able to cut it more easily. And then you can go on to say, well, then if you have, if you had like a machine, a saw, or an apple, apple cutter or something like that, or one of those electronic knives.
Size of the blade is
Yeah.
important.
Not the
If you're using, you're talking about saws now, thinking of.
not the size of it, but how much pressure you have to assert. And maybe a saw wouldn't be the best thing, because if you had something where like a electric blade.
That's what I say, electric saw.
Oh, electric, yeah, okay. An electric blade, then the amount of pressure you would have to exert, of the amount of work you have to put into the cutting of that apple, is going to be less than you had with trying to do it with a fork or a razor blade or even a knife. So you created a machine that improves your ability to do more work, to be more productive. So that's, and then every action into that work is an action which is guided by circular action, which he is demonstrating here through the schematics of these machines that he's building, which makes the work more in tune with the human action, to increase the power of human productivity and action. And all of these things are very clearly what Ron said. You're not just talking about machines here and how to build better machines, but how did these machines come about? They didn't just make themselves. The point goes back to the quote that we read before by Alexander Hamilton, which LaRouche took up on the question of the increases in the stimulating the human mind. And the human mind is what allows us to create better, more productive increases in tools, technologies, which also allows us to increase our productivity in society, thus being able to increase the productivity of the land area that we live on. Because, perfect example, if you have a piece of land, a square acre of land, and you need to till this land, the soil, so that you can produce on it, so you can plant crops and so that you can have agriculture on it. If all you had was you had no machinery, you had just a mule and just a
Sewing devices or whatever.
yeah, exactly.
Plow.
Huh?
And a plow.
And a plow and a mule or something, then your ability to actually make that land more productive is going to be very limited.
Right.
You can do it. It's going to take a lot. Very linear. Yeah, it's going to take more time. But if you had a machine tool, you had a tractor or something that can actually improve your ability to work. And it's not just work faster, because the increases in the ability to create more productive work. Why do you need to do that? Well, you don't necessarily just need to do that so people can have more time off and so you can go home and read. That'd be nice if you didn't have to be out in the field all day because you're trying to plow a plot of land it's taking you 24 hours versus if you had a productive machinery, it would take you, maybe 2 or 3 hours. It's
You get more land covered in it.
yeah, you get more covered, more work done, more productivity comes out of it, and the increases in the next stages of the productive powers.
Do you gain more weight when you have all these wonderful machines?
Do you do
need
it?
a membership to a spa after that?
Yes, you do. You need a membership to a spa.
You just don't come out as dog tired as you would if you were using a mule,
Well,
so that you can be more productive in your office.
I just hope we are though. Go back to the super.
More of your children can survive.
So they can design better machines for the next generation.
Right. So they can build
Keep
machines
people
that.
so busy they don't have to eat so much.
Yeah, I'm just thinking all the exercise I get by not having fancy machines.
I can build. So, I want to play a short clip from Lynn's Power of Labor, because I think it's important that we really, these are just some of the, some of the fundamental principles to start off this discussion in this work, because some of this might seem elementary, and to some people, but it really needs to be worked through more. But the question is, you really have to go back to this point of the science of economics and the economics and economy really is a science. It's not monetary value. You don't find value and you don't find production in society just based on what people think of economics today as the ups and downs of the market, or of how much money you have in society.
Or how much money you have in the bank.
How much money you have, in the bank. And, that's, so just keep those principles in mind, because as we're working through these things, it's going to kind of get a little bit, we'll have to work together to try to develop it. But I think going back to, what the difference between the thinking process and the putting human creative process at the forefront of economics, as was understood by those economists and scientists that went back to Nicholas of Cusa, that Leonardo da Vinci, that governed the ideas of our Treasury Secretary and the Alexander Hamilton, and those founding fathers and people who shaped our American system of what was known as the American system of political economy, had a completely different conception of production work and increases and advancements in technology than people like the Wall Street British Imperial ran people like Adam Smith. And these are the people who dominate our education system. When you look at education, when you go to economics class, you're reading Adam Smith, you're reading John Stuart Mills, and these guys who were all British protege, British agents. They were directly defying the principles of the American system of political economy. And so what we're discussing here is that there is a principle to the human mind, there's an organizing principle to the universe we live in, which is creative. That mankind is creative. Jeremy Bentham, the Adam Smith, mankind is nothing but another higher form of animal that's looking to fulfill its sensual pleasure. So when we're talking about these things in terms of the increases in technologies, increases in the productivity of society, again, that's the dividing line. And that's just an opening of where LaRouche starts to investigate into these great geniuses and what they were up against and what we're still up against today. What the Wall Street interests of today, people like George Soros and others of that pedigree, are directly in lineage with the British imperial policy of Adam Smith and John Stuart Mills and Lord Shelburne, Jeremy Bentham, and others. And that's what we're out to destroy. And that's what people have to understand, what it is that, LaRouche makes this fundamental discovery, which, we haven't even gotten into. We're starting at the surface here, and that we're going to investigate and come to understand by working through this very important book. This book was studied, as I said, 1984, that LaRouche wrote this book. It was studied throughout countries around the world, including Russia. There was later on another book that came out in 1998 after LaRouche made certain forecasts about the currency collapse in Asia that was called "Now Are You Ready to Learn About Economics?" that took up Lyndon LaRouche's economic studies. So there is also going to be, this is going to be something that we're taking up across the country, particularly in Manhattan and in New York. And this is, if people, I would encourage you to go to the website, and you'll also get another example, very good demonstration as well from Jason Ross from our science and research team. There was a new paradigm show done on this past Thursday where he went through some of the principles in the LaRouche's economic science, the idea of energy, some of the principles in this book that starting with the idea of energy flux density, which we demonstrated what we were demonstrated in this discussion of the assertion of energy on the knife blade. So, and increases in the technology. So I want to show, because I think this will be a very important segue by Lyndon LaRouche himself. And like I said, if people want to go and watch LaRouche's series, this is about a 2-hour presentation, 5 parts on the power of labor, that this would be really important. And I think it would actually make for some more livelier questions and discussions in terms of LaRouche's thinking pattern. So why don't we, I think I want to start at 6:05. You got that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. right.
Where are we there?
That's 18, what,
18 minutes.
about 18 minutes.
That was a TV show?
Yeah, that's the power.
It's a videotape.
It's
Well,
a video, but was it a
videotape.
TV show also?
No, it's
No.
a video.
Well, a lot of videos were.
And now it's put on the site. They put the video on the site.
It's on the website. So that's part one of his 5-part series, and yeah, I think it.
I think the idea might have been at the time public access TV and trying to get.
Yeah, I think it was on
Yeah.
public access TV. And then,
Was that an hour long or what's the total length of time? So
I think it's 2.5
I think it's about 2.5 hours.
that particular segment?
Each,
part is
they-
probably like half an hour.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I want to
they
know.
have-
So when
yeah.
I go back.
different parts, and then they'll do a title on the screen when they're going to the next part. So I wanted to use that to segue into Lynn's, again, what we've just covered here. And I think I want to end with this quote demonstrating what LaRouche was just stating in principle in his presentation there. In his writing, again, quote from LaRouche, on going back to his later work that I'm reading this because we also are going back through in our Executive Intelligence Review magazine. If you don't have a subscription to EIR Online, then you should get one, because what we're starting to do is to publish a number of Lyndon LaRouche's writings on economics, his writings on his taking on of the British imperial policy. So this one in particular was written, as I said, in 1987, just a couple of years after he wrote this work on So You Wish to Learn About Economics. And it really is important to take up as a foundation for his 4 laws on this principle of the second law, the creation of a credit system, a federal credit system, national bank, and his understanding of it's in defense of Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton. But here we are. So he states that from the standpoint of the economist, the thing about human existence which sets us above the beast is that we are able to effect successive advances in what we call scientific and technological knowledge, and are able to transmit that knowledge to one another in such a way as to raise the standard of living of the average person, while also increasing the potential size of the human population sustained at this improved level. No beast mind can generate or transmit scientific and technological progress. And that's the key to being fruitful. That's the key to understanding, as both Alexander Hamilton and LaRouche improves upon, that scientific and technological progress, the ability to make new discoveries that fosters the productivity of society, that if you put a beast or put an animal on a square kilometer of land, it will only be able to live off of that land. It can't actually produce something that's going to make the land more productive. It's same thing as whether it's here on Earth or in space. How do you improve the economy of another planet in space? You send a monkey or some animal up to space. Is it going to be able to colonize, or is it going to be able to create a permanent presence of increasing the population of the whale planet, or the, whales are kind of smart, but still, I don't think it can still increase its population on Mars or on the moon. So,
Or on Earth.
Or
Monkeys can't grow bananas.
what? Monkeys can't grow bananas.
And robots can't do what human creative minds can do.
Robots can't do what creative minds can do. Actually, I went to an event at NASA, and we were talking about the Curiosity rover. And the Curiosity rover on Mars has been there since 2012, yes. And what it has done in the, was that 4 years?
Oh, 5 years.
5
years is several.
5 years or so, yeah, that it's been there. A human being could have actually gone and made the discovery or covered the territory that it's covered in those almost 5 years. So, and this is the reason.
It could have done better, are you saying?
How much time?
Yeah.
It could have done it in a shorter amount of time, could have covered the area in a shorter amount of time.
Sure.
The same thing as to, we sent spacecraft, we sent instruments to the moon before, but it wasn't, and there was a collection of all different types of minerals, rocks, different types of substance on the moon. We orbited the moon, we landed on the moon with robotics and other instruments long before we sent human beings there. But it wasn't really until we sent human beings there that we understood the value of what was up there. You can bring it back to Earth, and you can do some research and instrumentation, but it's the impact of the human mind, which now increases our ability to make this a new frontier, to make it to turn this new frontier into something that's more productive, because otherwise it's just kind of like land area that's out there. And yes, the machine, the robotics, the machinery did something that we sent up there that prepared the way for human beings to go, but without human presence there, you would not have made the scientific breakthroughs that are necessary. So, and I think this is important, because we're not just talking about the advancements of technology and machines to improve the conditions of life in a small space or a limited space, for people to use in their backyard, but you have to be talking about technological progress that's going to improve and transform the conditions of society as a whole, that is going to create leaps in mankind's ability to increase its productivity in society. That just somebody creating something that's going to better advance their business. You create a new machine in your business or something like that. That's okay. That's good. That's helpful. Your business is going to make a better machine that's going to be able to do something that would be productive in society, that, as well as to make your business run better. But then if you actually do something that's going to help to increase the productivity of society as a whole, like the transformation of a new technology, a new platform in science, then that's when you're really creating the potential that you're increasing the ability to increase your population density. And there's many examples to go back to how society, has actually surpassed what was thought of, that human population is going to grow exponentially. As long as you have enough food, as long as you have enough resources, then you human population will grow as long as you have that, then it'll, peter off, it'll die off. I found this website that has these diagrams, and I didn't want to put them because I have to look through them and figure out which ones are copyrighted and not. So I didn't have time to go through all of that. But you can actually go through and put different countries, and it'll go from all the way back to 500 BC or something up into a trajectory to 2021 of the population growth and population density. And it shows the areas where you have the Industrial Revolution and other points, the Apollo mission, where population just spiked in certain areas because of the increases in new technologies, particularly. But then where even today in certain areas that, you look at what's happening with the drug epidemic, the suicides, going on in the United States and parts of transatlantic countries, where you start to see, if you don't have a mission for mankind, if you don't have new scientific discoveries, if we don't have a commitment to the development of space, then, if we're not increasing in our work, our agriculture, then, are you going to have an increase in your population? So this is why this is so important right now, because the question of economic science from increasing the productivity and the creativity of human beings, that's what we have to educate this Congress, we have to educate Trump, that this is the real fight around economics right now that's underway. This is the real fight that underlying LaRouche's 4 laws and Glass-Steagall. And we should have definitely more people join in these discussions, ask questions, contribute to the dialogue. So that's what I have right now. And it's getting late, but.
Did you want to suggest what people should read for next week?
No, we'll discuss it, and what we'll do is send it out online. In the next email the people get, we'll have the homework assignment for next week, what you should read, taken from. And again, if you got the email from us concerning this class series, then there's a link at the bottom of your email and we can also put that link on the in the title description of this discussion of how you can purchase and get a copy of the So You Wish to Learn All About Economics, a textbook on elementary mathematical economics by Lyndon LaRouche, 1984. So.
And not one like some of these books that are from 1984.
Yeah, that book's falling apart. Well, the good thing is that we have these. You can have it on your Kindle and too, so you can read it online on Google Books.
The book is online.
You can, they have it on Google Books where you can put it on. You can read it on your computer instead of reading it on the book, or you can actually get a textbook copy like this. Purchase a copy.
You can purchase a copy here.
You have copies to purchase here?
Why not? Don't we?
Not really.
I don't think so.
Not really, no.
Okay.
I don't think so. But you can't, the link will take you a copy, print on demand, new copy of the book for $9.99, $10. So it's not a lot, but it's well worth the investment. So that's what I have. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? We'll have more next week. I'm gonna throw this podium away.